Okay, so it looks like we have everything to go. We're streaming live now, so anytime that you're ready, we're good.
Thank you, Amanda. Just one thing. I'm supposed to have a little blue hand at the base of my screen, aren't I, to see who's voting and who's not? And I can't seem to find that. Oh, well, I see Selena Williams now.
Okay, so Councillor Parkinson, that's when somebody puts their hand up. So now I'm going to drop it.
Got it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, we're good to go then. I'd like to call the September 8, 2020 Committee of the Whole meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. and acknowledge that we're meeting on the shared traditional lands of the Coast Salish people. Also appropriate, I think, at this time to mention that our fire crews are out with the View Royal and Langford crews fighting a fire in View Royal, and our best wishes, of course, are with them. And hopefully everybody's being safe out there and getting the job done. So now I'm going to ask for a roll call and ask that each of you announce your presence with a here. Councillor Baxter?
I am here.
Councillor Day?
I am here.
Councillor Jansen? Councillor Kobayashi?
Here.
Councillor Logan?
Here.
Mayor Martin?
Yeah, present.
Councillor Jansen, have you showed up yet? I saw his name here earlier. Okay, we'll give him a second. I'm sure he's not far away. I know he said he was stuck in traffic. Then what I'd like to do is look for an approval of the agenda, the near-term and long-term agenda. Can I get a motion for that? Moved by Councillor Baxter. Do I need a seconder?
No.
Okay. Any in opposition to approving the near and long-term agenda?
Oh, Mr. Mayor, discussion?
Yeah,
Thank you. Any discussion of the near and long-term agenda? Seeing two hands, Councillor Baxter, or should I have dropped that? Mayor Martin, I believe you're up.
Thank you. I just, unfortunately, my agenda did not have page 3 or 4. So can somebody tell me what is after 5.3?
Just
Next
next
meeting.
meeting and then adjournment.
Just next meeting? Okay. Is there any page 4?
No, it's blank.
Thank you.
Councillor Day?
Thank you. I just wanted to share, I don't have a specific recommendation, but on the near and long-term agendas, or are we only discussing tonight's agenda at the moment?
I thought we were starting with the near and long-term agenda. I'd look for a separate motion for tonight's agenda.
Okay, thank you. So just on the near and the long-term agenda, I've said before that I really think that the public appreciates it when we try not to schedule meetings that are during frequent holiday times. And I realize that we all had staycations this year, but we had a very full agenda in August. And it looks like we may be heading towards having another very full agenda in December of this year. So I'm just asking if staff could have a look at where they might be able to juggle things, because we seem to have a really full agenda followed by not quite as full an agenda. And I'd like to try to work towards evening that out so that it's not so much on any one evening, or when people are potentially not paying attention because they're doing their family life instead.
I think we can all get behind that intent. It's probably easier said than done, but I think it's, I'm sure staff has heard that and acknowledged that. I don't think we need to do anything more of that. You weren't looking for any more, were you? No? Okay. I see Councillor Jansen has joined the meeting, so if that could be noted. And then any in opposition to the near and long-term agenda? Seeing none, I look for a motion for tonight's agenda. Moved by Councillor Kobayashi. Any discussion? Councillor Jansen. Were you trying to discuss, Councillor Jansen, or just a late mover?
A late bloomer. I took it back, sorry.
Okay. So with no discussion, any in dissent of tonight's agenda? Seeing none. Adoption of the minutes, Committee of the Whole minutes from July 6, 2020. Could I get a mover on that, please? Councillor Jansen. Any discussion? Seeing none, any in opposition? Seeing none, that's approved. Next, we move on to public participation. I had been told that there was none scheduled. Is that still the case, Amanda?
We did not receive any written submissions, nor did we have anyone registered to speak tonight.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving right along, 5.1, bylaw notice enforcement regulation. I believe Mr. Nihas has a report for us. If you could be so good.
Yes, thank you very much. Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Bylaw notice enforcement regulation, also known as bylaw adjudication, is intended to replace most bylaw enforcement actions under the current municipal ticket information system, more commonly known as the MTI system. The bylaw notice enforcement regulation system was introduced as a pilot project in the 3 municipalities that make up the North Shore of Metro Vancouver region in 2003. The objective was to streamline the process by which minor bylaw violations were enforced by means of fines and diverting disputes away from the provincial court system while maintaining procedural fairness through a quasi-judicial adjudication system. To date, there are approximately 100 local governments that use the bylaw notice enforcement regulation system. For the city of Colwood, it would streamline the processing of any tickets, which are called bylaw notices, by the bylaw enforcement officer not having to personally serve a ticket. It would be left underneath the windshield wiper of the parking violation, for example, and by having the dispute heard by an appointed third party from a list of adjudicators provided by the Office of the Attorney General, without any further involvement required of the bylaw enforcement officer. In 2019, the city issued approximately 110 warnings for parking violations, but no tickets. The current process under the MTI system is the bylaw enforcement officer would leave a copy of the municipal ticket on a vehicle, then return to the office and search for the registered owner of the vehicle, then drive to the registered owner's residence and personally serve the ticket. If the ticket is disputed, the matter would go to provincial court, starting a lengthy process which would require the bylaw enforcement officer going to court to first swear evidence, then appear before the court to give testimony and wait for the decision of the judge. The time required to process a ticket under this MTI system is somewhat, could be argued, as not a wise use of staff resources for a $30 fine. The bylaw adjudication system will require that the bylaw enforcement officer only leave a bylaw notice on the vehicle, for example, and it would be considered served with no more action required on the part of the bylaw officer. If the recipient of the bylaw notice wished to dispute it, notice of dispute would be sent to a screening officer, could be somebody like myself in that role, for a review of the accuracy of the bylaw notice and would cancel it if there was an error. If the screening officer upholds the bylaw notice, the recipient can then pay a $25 fee to appear before the adjudicator to dispute the bylaw notice in a hearing type of environment. The decision of the adjudicator is final. If the adjudicator rules in favor of the bylaw notice recipient, the $25 fee is refunded and the bylaw notice is canceled. If the bylaw notice is upheld by the adjudicator, the fine is now due. The bylaw enforcement regulation will have a meaningful impact on the efficiency of dealing with minor violations of the city's bylaws. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Questions, Councillor Baxter?
I'd like to move option 1 on page 4 of the report, page 28 of the agenda.
Thank you. Then discussion on the motion, Councillor Jansen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Nyhouse. This is great. I'm fully aware of how cumbersome the MTI process is. Just a few questions. Does this mean that we would be producing ticket books and cheater books for the bylaws that we would then pass along to our RCMP partners?
And through the chair to Councillor Jansen, yes, it would. We would be providing them with bylaw notice books and a list of the bylaws that we would be enforcing under it. They're typically bylaws that involve minor infractions. The amount of the fine under the bylaw regulation, bylaw notice enforcement regulation system cannot exceed $500. So we'd be providing this to the RCMP along with a primer on how to issue these and the process by which Colwood would follow.
That's great. And I take it that process would come with your typical early early pay options or voluntary pay options at a lesser amount within 30 days, et cetera, et cetera.
That is what most jurisdictions do, and I support that. It gives an incentive to the person receiving the notice to pay it early and have the matter resolved quickly.
So I think that anything we can do to streamline your employees' process so that they're not completing long informations and going through the court process and back and forth to the registry and chasing people down to serve them should be fully endorsed. Further to that, whatever we can do to make the lives of our serving men and women in our local detachment that much easier, because they have to carry ticket books for all the regions, all the areas, different jurisdictions. So the easier we can make it for them when we're asking them to conduct enforcement on our behalf in places of conflict, like Millburn, Lagoon, Ocean Boulevard area, some of our parks and trails. So I fully endorse this initiative and I look forward to it being implemented. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mayor Martin? Mayor Martin, did you wish to comment?
Yeah, yes, I do. Sorry, Chair, I just had to unmute. Thank you. I will be supporting the motion and I am supportive of this moving forward. One thing in the report, however, I would have found it a lot more helpful had we actually had some reporting and some statistics on, for example, the previous year, on how much we are actually servicing and our bylaw officers are writing tickets. When do we anticipate to see that coming to council?
Through the chair to Mayor Martin, there is a bylaw service review scheduled for November, and we'll be looking at the overall system that has been used and how bylaws are enforced in the city at that time, with the intent of asking council for their direction on how to proceed in the future.
Thank you. Through the chair, I guess I'm looking for more. When will you be providing stats on the previous year to this council on what bylaw has done?
Through the chair to Mayor Martin, I was going to take that opportunity to provide all the statistics at that time.
Okay, so the previous reporting of say the last 3 years of what bylaw has done and what has been ticketed will be presented to us in November.
Through the chair to Mayor Martin, yes, it will.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Kobayashi.
Oh, there we go. Just through the chair, a quick question, James. Just approximately how many, have you sort of guesstimated how many man hours this is going to save your enforcement people?
Through the chair to Councillor Kobayashi, I think the most noticeable change would be the number of tickets that we would issue would go up rather than just handing out warnings. The present system, I have to admit, has been somewhat of a deterrent to us issuing tickets due to the difficulty and how time consuming it is to process. The intent of the bylaw notice enforcement regulation is very much streamlined. So I would say if we were to compare apples to apples, we would probably be doing about 25% of the work under this system than the current MTI system.
Wow. Wow. Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Kobayashi. Councillor Day.
Thank you. I'm a little concerned about the costs associated with sharing a service with other municipalities because they may have very different numbers over time than we have. Can you tell us a little bit about how we would share the costs of adjudication?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, the adjudicator would be hired for either half a day or a full day of hearings, depending on the volume of disputes that are received. The fee schedule is laid out for level 3 mediators by the Attorney General's office. Memory serves from the Act, it's a cost of about $448 for half a day for the services of an adjudicator. We expect that every 3 months, we may need an adjudicator for half a day. I believe we were predicting based on statistics comparable to other jurisdictions and the volume of tickets we anticipate to issue, that we would have 5 that were disputed in a year. So the costs of adjudication would be spread out, I think, pro rata between the various municipalities by which we have an intermunicipal agreement.
What do you mean by pro rata?
That has yet to be set up, but I believe the municipality that has the greatest number of disputes would bear the majority of the cost.
Okay, so that's a bit unclear for me. I guess I'm a little surprised at this report because what I thought we had asked for was information on how we were going to deal with parking violations. And this report seems to be bigger than that. And so I'm just concerned that parking issues may need different approaches depending on the locations. For example, by a high school is going to have different needs than down at Esquimalt Lagoon. So I understood that we were trying to look at how we prioritize and enforce our parking without going broke from putting up signs and ending up paying more for enforcement of those signs. So I guess did I misunderstand? Is there a bigger purpose to this report than just parking issues?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, bylaw enforcement takes place at the same level through the same method. Any bylaw violation would be enforced through the system that a city or local government has in place. So I guess the answer to your question is twofold, Councillor. One, how the city chooses to regulate parking demand is the subject of a different report, and the council did give direction to staff to hire a consultant to come up with a system by which that would happen. But enforcement of the parking bylaws, in particular violations of parking, would be done under the bylaw enforcement system that the city either currently has in place or, as this report is suggesting, to adopt.
Okay, thank you. So I guess I will just add that bylaw enforcement probably has been the most problematic and the least loved of our community services for some time. Several times we've looked at whether or not enforcement should be done on a complaint basis or whether it should just be the enforcement of the bylaws wherever bylaw officers see an issue. And that has been quite clearly articulated to me from members of the community that they wanted to remain a complaint-based system because otherwise it could lead to a great deal of job creation in terms of creating a need for more enforcement. So unfortunately, I can't support this recommendation because I think it opens the door. While it is more efficient than the system that we have been using, it doesn't place any limits that I can see on how much bylaw enforcement is done and where the emphasis should be. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe that's all who wish to speak to the bylaw. Seems any in opposition to the motion to option 1? I have Councillor Day in opposition. Motion passes. Moving on to 5.2, the 2021-2025 financial plan process. I'd like to invite Mr. Alan Thomas, the Chief Financial Officer, to introduce this item. Mr. Thomas?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be seeking endorsement of the 21 to 2025 financial plan process timing. As indicated in my report, budgeting typically occurs in February, March of the active fiscal year. And this results in budgets normally being approved in April or May, which can be up to about 5 months into the current fiscal year. There's a couple of potential issues with this. Number one, it can be difficult for staff's annual planning process to set the objectives. And also, there is the potential inability to start projects, especially if they are new projects that weren't included in a prior year financial plan. So given this, I'm proposing moving up the budgeting timelines with the key dates sort of being as outlined in the report. Namely, in October, staff will prepare the budget plans internally to have them ready in advance of the council service review meetings. We'll then meet in November with the service review meetings and obviously get any recommendations from council for budget updates. We'll take those recommendations back to staff and update and get amended budgets ready for mid-December to present to council. After that, we'll bring the final budget numbers ready for January, or we'll have the final budget numbers ready, excuse me, in January 2021 and looking for council approval at that point of the 2021 to 2025 financial plan. So even though budgets will be approved, we will still have the tax bylaw at a similar time, which is in April. And again, that's required at that time because we need the final BC tax assessments, which are at the end of March 31st, and also other rates from CRD, school, et cetera, which we get in early April. So again, recommending we accept the proposed budget process timelines, and please advise if any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. I have a number of hands up. I guess I'll entertain discussion until one of you wants to make the recommendation. First, Councillor Day.
Sorry, no, I didn't. I must have still been up from the
Okay.
previous item.
Probably my fault there. Councillor Jansen.
I'll move option 1, Mr. Chair, and I don't think this requires much motivation.
Thank you. I'm taking it that's the recommendation that we have here, that the 2021 to 2025 financial plan process be endorsed. Mayor Martin.
Thank you. I'll support the motion that was before. I was going to move it as well. I would have preferred for us to finalize our budgets in December so that we actually go fiscal year to fiscal year. But as Councillor Day has brought up, December is a very busy month with holidays and family things, and a lot of staff taking time off as well. So I think it's realistic that we try and complete that in January. Thank
you, Your Worship. Councillor Baxter.
Yeah, I just have a question about the 3-month gap between council approval of the financial plan and the related bylaw and the bylaw adoption.
And why the delay, Councillor? Is that what you're asking? Excuse me?
Yeah. Why a 3-month gap?
Yeah, so from the tax bylaw perspective, so the budget is approved in January with the set tax revenue and any applicable increases, et cetera, that we would expect. In order to set the actual rates per property tax class, we need the final tax assessment values from BC Assessments. Those aren't available until March 31st. And in addition, we get the other rates, let's say, from CRD, from school tax, et cetera. We don't receive those until early April as well. So again, can't complete a tax bylaw until early to mid-April because of missing information.
So I guess the next question coming out of that is any of that information, I recognize what you say, that you can't actually approve the bylaw, but is there any significant likelihood that any of that information would require us to change the financial plan or the bylaw?
No, I've spoken to BC Assessment about the process. Basically, by December 31st, they're 99.9% sure of assessments. There are the odd item that can change, but appeals, for instance, would not even be ready by the time the tax bylaw comes into effect. So it's really about just making sure the non-core municipal tax rates, again, CRD, MFA, schools, et cetera, we cannot do that until we get their information and their rates. So no, excuse me. So to answer your question, no, they're I'm going to say will not, but I should be careful. There should not be any material change during that period, and I wouldn't expect that there would be.
Thank you very much. I'll be supporting the motion.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Those in opposition, please raise your hand. Seeing none, I'll call that passed. Moving on now to 5.3, the annual report 2019. I'd like to invite Sandra Russell, our corporate communications manager, to introduce this item.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Can you hear me all right?
You're a little soft.
Okay. This better?
A little bit, yep.
So tonight I'd like to present the City of Colwood draft annual report for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2019. The annual report is a collaborative effort by all city departments, and it provides an opportunity to review and celebrate some of the accomplishments of the city this year. This year, the report outlines significant strides toward the city's vision of Colwood as a spectacular seaside community that is set apart by its outstanding natural setting and exceptional quality of life. Over the past year, Council has taken steps toward promoting a greater understanding of the value of natural and built assets, better defining service levels, expanding the city's tax base with new commercial and industrial development, and planning for capital infrastructure projects, among other things. Just a note about producing the annual report during the COVID-19 pandemic. This year, the annual deadline, or the deadline for annual reports, statement of financial information, SOFI reports, audited financial statements, and local government data was set at August 31st. COWID's financial statements and SOFI report were submitted and publicly available on that date. The draft annual report was also prepared by August 31st. Unfortunately, it didn't make the deadline for that council meeting, so here we have it tonight. The annual report doesn't present any new information not already made public in the 5-year financial plan. It's really just an opportunity to present the city's filed financial documents together with service accomplishments and plans for 2020. The report is now available online and at City Hall for viewing by members of the public for 2 weeks, as is required by the community charter. So if any public input is received, which hasn't been the trend over the past few years, it will be presented to council on September 28th, along with any recommendations from you tonight. So I present this for you to receive tonight, if you so choose. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I get a motion to receive? Moved by Councillor Kobayashi. I'm going to lower hands. Any discussion? Councillor Kobayashi. You're muted, Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much, through the chair. Thank you very much, Sandra. It was a very well-written report. The only thing that I still have problems with, because I don't understand it maybe, and that is what we call performance measures. They're not really performance measures per se. It's data that's coming out of each of the department. It's not really a measurement of performance. You know, for example, you can go to almost every one of these departments and you can look at the numbers. And, you know, like, for example, if you go to development services, you have planning approvals processed. Well, we have 75 in 2019, but that means nothing to me. I mean, how many did we plan? Did we plan 90? So we're underperforming? Do you know what I mean? And then, you know, how many calls we get, that doesn't mean anything to me. You know, are we, you know, enforcement, how many calls we get on enforcement, like that, again, doesn't mean anything to me. If they're doing their job, maybe there's hundreds of them. I don't know, you know, because there's nothing that we're measuring against. So I do take, I think the wording's wrong. I mean, you can show the data, but they're not actually performance measures. You know, so are we trying to improve on these numbers or not improve on these numbers? And I mean, the very fact that we have our construction values up, there's a reason for that. Is it necessarily a performance measure? Performance against what benchmark? So I think that's a bad term to use. They're not really performance measurements per se. It's data that's coming out to say, this is what has been accomplished or what has been achieved, but it's not really a performance measure. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Sorry, Councillor Kobayashi, do you have anything else?
No, I don't. It's just a comment because I just don't think it's the right word. It becomes offensive maybe to some folks out there because they're not real performance measurements.
Gotcha. Yep. Thank you. Mayor Martin?
Thank you. I have one question and I have a comment. If we looked at page 27 of the annual report, and that would also be, I'm sorry, I'm trying to find what I believe it would be page 61 of the agenda. Looking under, I'm not going to argue what Councillor Kobayashi was talking about around performance measurements, but in regards to performance measurements on policing, the numbers are really skewed because as we see, the number is 670 in 2017, and then the number jumps dramatically in 2018 to over 3,500 calls, and now we're over 4,400 calls, whereas in 2 years ago we were 670. So clearly we're measuring this differently now, and that number seems very skewed, especially as we talk about this. So could staff please comment on those and where those numbers came from?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Martin. Those numbers come from the West Shore RCMP annual report. And I acknowledge that these performance measures need work. So we added this aspect of the report last year with the hopes that showing the trend over time would be an indicator. I take Councillor Kobayashi's point well, that the label is probably wrong and that it needs some explanation, especially in this case, about what the change was. Is it just that there are more officers and therefore we are able to process more calls? It's an excellent point, and it's something that I will look at before we bring it back on September 28th.
Okay, thank you. And then I just have one comment, Chair. If you're looking at page 2 of the report, I'm excited with what's written in page 2. It's very exciting, and I really do hope that the city and residents of the city actually look through, and if they only read page 2, they would get a great picture of where the city is lying. You know, we roughly have about 6,800 households within the city of Colwood. There's over $4.2 billion in assessed value for the city, and that we had over $105 million of new construction in this last fiscal year, and I expect those numbers to only grow in the next 2 years as we continue through our mandate. And so it's an amazing measure to be comparing us in 2021, 2022, because you'll also see, I think you'll see those numbers escalate. And then that final bottom number, that there's $249,000 of new taxation that has been generated from new growth. And that is just this year, which adds to our coffers every year moving forward. And I expect that number will be increasing in the next 2 years as well. So it's very exciting times for the city of Colwood. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mayor Martin. I'd call a vote. I just want to be sure I've had this thing moved. Did we get this thing moved? Sylvia, can you confirm that?
Yes, Councillor Kobayashi moved the motion.
All right, thank you. Any in opposition to the motion? Seeing none, that's been passed. Okay, item 6, next meeting. The next meeting of the Committee of the Whole is scheduled to be held Monday, October 5th, 2020. Anybody interested in moving adjournment? I recognize Councillor Logan. Any in opposition? Seeing none, thank you all. Have a good evening. Oops.
Bye, all.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you.